The bench press bar felt heavier tonight, 300 pounds of cold steel pressing down while my wife's voice echoed in my head like a broken record. Don't come to the company party. My ex will be there, and I don't want him to feel awkward. I pushed the weight up one more time, muscles straining against the resistance. Poor guy, I'd thought at the time. He'll have to face the real husband someday. My name is Pierce Eldro, and I run a martial arts gym in the suburbs outside Boston. Nothing fancy, just honest sweat, worn mats, and the kind of wisdom that comes from getting knocked down enough times to learn how to get back up. My wife Cleo works for Hartwell Cybersecurity, one of those glass and chrome companies where everyone wears designer suits and talks about synergy while stabbing each other in the back with Mont Blanc pens. 3 days had passed since Cleo delivered her little speech about the company party. 3 days of watching her fidget with her phone, take mysterious calls in the other room, and suddenly develop an interest in working late. Real late. The kind of late that comes with Uber receipts to downtown hotels and calendar alerts that disappear faster than free donuts at a police station. I racked the weights and grabbed my towel, thinking about Anton Beck, the ex in question. Old money, crypto finance, the kind of guy who wears boat shoes without irony and thinks summer is a verb. Cleo always claimed they were just friends now, that their college romance was ancient history. But ancient history has a funny way of repeating itself, especially when it comes wearing a tailored suit and driving a Tesla. The gym was empty, except for me and the ghosts of 1,000 workouts. I'd built this place from nothing after leaving the military, turning an abandoned warehouse into something that mattered. Real people came here, construction workers, single mothers, kids from the neighborhood who needed somewhere to channel their anger into something productive. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Unlike whatever Cleo was doing these days, I'd started noticing the changes about 2 months ago. New clothes that cost more than my monthly gym insurance. Sudden interest in networking events that always seemed to involve Anton's social circle. Phone calls that stopped the moment I walked into the room, and that special kind of distance that married couples develop right before everything goes to pieces. The smart thing would have been to confront her directly, maybe suggest counseling, try to work things out like mature adults. But I'd learned a long time ago that smart and effective aren't always the same thing. Sometimes you need to gather intelligence before you make your move. So I did what any reasonable husband would do. I started paying attention. The first thing I noticed was the calendar. Cleo had always been meticulous about scheduling, color-coding everything from grocery runs to date nights. But suddenly there were gaps, empty spaces where she claimed to be working late, but her office parking garage showed no activity on those nights. I knew because I'd driven by, just to check. The second thing was the credit cards. We'd always maintained separate accounts for personal expenses, but shared one for household stuff. The shared account showed charges at restaurants I'd never heard of, boutique stores in parts of town we never visited, and a particularly interesting charge at a lingerie shop that specialized in intimate apparel for the discerning woman. I hadn't seen any of that intimate apparel. The third thing was Anton himself. He'd started showing up in Cleo's social media again, liking photos and leaving comments that walked right up to the line of inappropriate without quite crossing it. Looking beautiful as always, and wish I could have been there. And my personal favorite, some things never change. You still light up every room. Real subtle, Anton. But the final piece of the puzzle came 3 nights ago, when Cleo made her little announcement about the company party. She'd been nervous, fidgeting with her wedding ring, a tell I'd learned to recognize during our 8 years of marriage. She was planning something, and she didn't want me there to see it. That's when I decided to stop being the understanding husband and start being the guy who runs a gym in a neighborhood where problems get solved with direct action. I locked up the gym and walked out into the cool October air. Boston suburbs at night have their own rhythm. Quiet streets lined with houses where normal families live normal lives, dealing with normal problems like mortgage payments and parent-teacher conferences. I used to think we were part of that world. Now I wasn't so sure. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake Caffrey, my best friend and owner of the dive bar where I sometimes went to think. Mitts, they called him back when he was fighting professionally, on account of his habit of breaking his hands on other people's faces. These days he served beer and dispensed the kind of wisdom that only comes from getting punched in the head for money. Heard about the party situation, the text read. Stop by if you need to talk strategy. I smiled despite everything. News traveled fast in our little corner of the world, especially when it involved potential drama. Mitts had probably heard about Cleo's ex-boyfriend situation from one of his regulars. The neighborhood gossip network was more efficient than the internet. But I wasn't ready to talk strategy yet. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I drove home through streets I'd traveled thousands of times, past the coffee shop where Cleo and I used to meet for breakfast on Sundays, past the park where we talked about buying a house and starting a family. All those conversations felt like they'd happened to different people now, people who trusted each other and shared the same vision of the future. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Cleo's car wasn't there. Another late night at the office, apparently. I let myself in and headed straight for her home office, a converted bedroom where she kept her laptop and handled the business side of her career. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed of it either. When someone you love starts lying to you, you have two choices. You can pretend everything is fine and hope it works out, or you can find out the truth and deal with whatever comes next. I'd never been much good at pretending. Cleo's laptop was password protected, but she'd never been particularly creative with security. Her password was our anniversary date, which either meant she still cared about our marriage, or she was too lazy to think of something else. I was betting on lazy. The laptop opened like a digital diary, full of secrets and half-truths, and the kind of evidence that destroys marriages. Email threads with Anton that went back months, filled with inside jokes and shared memories and the gradual escalation from friendly to intimate, to planning secret meetings. Calendar entries that didn't match what she'd told me. Photo albums from events I'd never heard of, with Anton's arm around her waist and both of them smiling like teenagers. But the real revelation was in her work calendar. The company party, the one she didn't want me to attend, wasn't just some casual office gathering. It was the annual donor appreciation event, a high-profile affair where Hartwell Cybersecurity courted investors and celebrated their biggest clients. The kind of event where appearances mattered, where being seen with the right person could make or break careers. And according to the seating chart buried in her email attachments, Cleo had arranged to sit at Anton's table, listed as his guest rather than as my wife. I sat back in her chair, staring at the screen and feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This wasn't just an affair, it was a public declaration. She was planning to parade Anton around like a trophy, to let everyone in her professional world know that she'd upgraded from the gym owner to the finance guy with the trust fund. The only problem with her plan was that she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I hadn't actually agreed to stay home. I spent the next hour copying files, downloading email threads, and taking screenshots of everything that might be useful later. If Cleo wanted to play games, I'd make sure I understood the rules. And if she wanted to make this public, well, I'd give her a show she'd never forget. By the time I heard her car in the driveway, I was back in the living room with a beer and a basketball game on television, looking like the picture of domestic contentment. Cleo came in looking slightly disheveled, her lipstick gone, and her hair mussed in a way that suggested she'd been doing more than reviewing quarterly reports. "Hey," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "How was your night?" "Quiet," I replied, taking a sip of beer. "Just worked out and came home. How about you? Get everything sorted out at the office?" She nodded quickly, already heading toward the stairs. "Yeah, just some last-minute preparation for the party tomorrow night. I'm exhausted." "I bet," I said. "Good thing you don't have to worry about me being there to complicate things." She paused on the bottom step, and for a moment I thought she might actually tell me the truth. Instead, she just smiled, that bright, artificial smile she'd been practicing lately. "Thanks for understanding, Pierce. I know it seems silly, but Anton's been going through a rough patch, and I just want to keep things simple." "Of course," I said. "Simple is good. Poor guy probably has enough to worry about without having to face the husband." She nodded and disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone with my beer and my plans. Outside, the suburban night continued its quiet rhythm, but inside our house, everything had changed. Tomorrow night, Cleo would get her company party. She'd get her moment in the spotlight with Anton Beck. She just wouldn't get it the way she'd planned. The next morning dawned gray and cold, the kind of October day that makes you think about winter coming whether you want to or not. I was up early, partly from habit, and partly because I had work to do. Cleo was still asleep, curled up on her side of the bed like she was protecting secrets even in her dreams. I made coffee and toast, going through the motions of a normal morning while my mind worked through the logistics of the evening ahead. The company party started at 7, which meant Cleo would leave around 6:30. That gave me time to make some calls and put the final pieces of my plan into place. The first call was to Veronica Harrington, Cleo's boss and the CEO of Hartwell Cybersecurity. I'd met her a few times at company functions. A sharp woman in her early 40s who'd built her business from nothing and didn't suffer fools gladly. More importantly, she'd always been friendly toward me, asking about the gym and making jokes about needing more physical activity in her own life. "Pierce," she said when she answered, sounding surprised. "This is unexpected. What can I do for you?" "I was wondering if I could ask you a favor," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I know Cleo told you I couldn't make it tonight, but my schedule cleared up unexpectedly. Would it be possible to add me back to the guest list?" There was a pause, and I could hear the sound of papers shuffling in the background. "That's interesting," Veronica said finally, "because according to my records, Cleo never mentioned you couldn't attend. In fact, your name is still on the original guest list." I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. "Is that so? Well, maybe there was some confusion. Would it be all right if I came after all?" "Of course," she said, and there was something in her voice that suggested she was enjoying this conversation more than she was letting on. "In fact, why don't you ride with me? I could use the company, and we can catch up on the way." "That's very generous," I said. "Are you sure it wouldn't be an imposition?" "Not at all. I'll pick you up at 6:45. And Pierce, I think tonight is going to be very interesting." The second call was to Jake Caffrey. Mitz answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting for my call. "Please tell me you're not planning to do anything stupid," he said without preamble. "Define stupid," I replied. "Anything that ends with you in handcuffs or on the evening news." "Then no, nothing stupid. Just a little public education." I could hear him sigh through the phone. "What do you need?" "Information. You still have contacts in the event planning business?" "My cousin Diane runs catering for half the fancy parties in Boston." "Why?" "I need to know about the vendor contracts for tonight's party. Specifically, who has authority to make changes to seating arrangements and access permissions." "Jesus, Pierce, you're really going to do this?" "She made her choice, Jake. Now I'm making mine." There was another pause, then the sound of him lighting a cigarette. "Give me an hour, but Pierce, whatever you're planning, make sure it's worth it, because there's no going back after tonight." "I know," I said. "That's the point." The third call was the most important one, and also the most difficult. I dialed the number for Hartwell's main office and asked to be transferred to the contracts department. "This is Pierce Eldro," I told the woman who answered. "I'm calling about the vendor agreement for tonight's donor appreciation event. I need to review the authority clauses in Section 12. "Of course, Mr. Eldro. Let me pull that up for you." I waited, drumming my fingers on the kitchen table while she accessed the file. The vendor agreement was something I'd signed 6 months ago, back when Cleo and I were planning to attend the party together. At the time, it had seemed like a formality, a way for the company to ensure that all guests understood the rules about photography, social media, and confidentiality. What I'd remembered, and what Cleo had apparently forgotten, was the clause that gave the signing party authority over certain aspects of the event in case of compliance issues or conflicts of interest. It was buried in legal language and probably seemed meaningless to most people. But I'd learned to read contracts carefully during my military days, when the difference between authorized and permitted could mean the difference between a successful mission and a court-martial. "I have that section here," the woman said. "Is there something specific you need clarified?" "Yes," I said. "If there's a compliance breach or conflict of interest involving a guest's behavior, what authority does the signing party have to address the situation?" According to Section 12.3, the signing party has the right to modify seating arrangements, revoke access permissions, and take any reasonable steps to maintain the integrity of the event. This includes the authority to override secondary arrangements made by other parties. And who is listed as the signing party for tonight's event? That would be you, Mr. Eldro, Pierce Eldro, representing the Eldro Family Trust. I smiled. The family trust was something my lawyer had set up years ago for tax purposes, but it had the useful side effect of making me the legal representative for any contract signed in its name, including tonight's vendor agreement. "Thank you," I said. "That's exactly what I needed to know." By the time Cleo came downstairs for breakfast, I was back in normal husband mode, reading the sports section and making small talk about weekend plans. She seemed nervous, checking her phone constantly and barely touching her coffee. "Big night tonight," I said casually. She nodded, not looking up from her phone. "Yeah, lots of important people will be there. Investors, board members, potential clients. Sounds like the kind of event where you want everything to go perfectly." "Exactly." She finally looked at me, and I could see the guilt in her eyes, mixed with something that might have been excitement. "Are you sure you're okay with me going alone? I know it's not ideal." "Don't worry about me," I said. "I'll probably just hang out at the gym, maybe grab a beer with Jake. You go have fun with Anton." The name slipped out so casually that it took her a moment to register what I'd said. When she did, her face went pale. "What do you mean?" "Your ex," I said, still reading the paper. "Anton Beck. That's who you're worried about feeling awkward, right? I looked him up online. Seems like a nice guy, very successful. I'm sure you two will have a great time catching up." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. Finally, she managed a weak smile. "Right, Anton. Yes, he'll be there." "Well," I said, folding the paper and standing up. "I'm sure it will be a night to remember." I kissed her forehead, the kind of casual married couple kiss that meant nothing and everything, and headed out to the gym. I had a business to run, and more importantly, I had a few more calls to make. The gym was busy that morning, full of regulars working off their frustrations on heavy bags and weight machines. I moved through my usual routine, checking equipment, reviewing schedules, helping newer members with their form. Normal work that helped keep my mind focused on what needed to be done. Around noon, Jake called back with the information I'd requested. His cousin had been very helpful and very discreet. "The catering contract gives you override authority on seating arrangements," he said. "Apparently, it's standard language to prevent conflicts between different vendors. And get this, any changes to the guest list or access permissions have to be approved by the primary contract holder. Which is me. Which is you. Pierce, are you absolutely sure about this? Because once you pull this trigger, there's no putting the bullet back in the gun." I looked around the gym at the people working hard to improve themselves, to build something better than what they'd started with. This place was real. The relationships here were honest. People said what they meant and meant what they said. I'm sure, I told him. The rest of the day passed in a blur of normal activities that felt anything but normal. I taught a self-defense class to a group of college students, worked with a teenager who was training for his first amateur fight, and handled the dozen small crises that come with running a small business. But underneath it all, I was thinking about the evening ahead. At 5 o'clock, I closed the gym early and went home to get ready. Cleo was already in the bedroom, laying out her dress for the evening, a black cocktail number that I'd never seen before. Expensive, sophisticated, and designed to make an impression. New dress? I asked. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. I wanted something special for tonight. It's beautiful, I said, and meant it. Anton's going to love it. She flinched at the name, but didn't deny the implication. We were past the point of pretending now, even if she didn't realize it yet. I showered and put on my best suit, navy blue, well-tailored, the kind of outfit that said I belonged in rooms with important people, making important decisions. I'd worn it to our wedding, and to every significant event in our marriage since then. Tonight felt like it deserved the same level of formality. At 6:30, Cleo came downstairs looking stunning and guilty in equal measure. She kissed my cheek, another one of those meaningless, meaningful gestures, and headed for the door. "Have a good evening," I called after her. "I hope everything goes exactly the way you planned." She paused in the doorway, and for a moment I thought she might change her mind about everything. Instead, she just nodded and walked out to her car. 15 minutes later, Veronica Harrington pulled into my driveway in a silver Mercedes that probably cost more than most people's houses. I grabbed my jacket and headed outside, ready for whatever the evening would bring. "You look like a man with a plan," Veronica said as I got into the passenger seat. "Something like that," I replied. She smiled, the kind of smile that suggested she knew more than she was saying. "Good. I've always believed that the best parties are the ones where something unexpected happens." As we drove toward downtown Boston, I thought about Cleo and Anton, probably already at the hotel, thinking they were so clever with their secret plans and hidden agendas. They had no idea that the evening was about to become much more interesting than they'd bargained for. Poor guys. They were about to learn that sometimes the husband shows up anyway. The Fairmont Copley Plaza rose from the Boston street like a monument to old money and older secrets, its limestone facade glowing under the warm lights of the entrance canopy. Valets in crisp uniforms moved between luxury cars with practiced efficiency, while men in $1,000 suits and women in designer gowns made their way through the revolving doors. "Impressive venue," I said, as Veronica's Mercedes joined the parade of vehicles. "Cleo suggested it," Veronica replied, pulling up to the valet stand. "Said it would make the right impression on potential investors." I filed that information away as we stepped out of the car. The October evening was crisp and clear, perfect weather for the kind of event where careers were made and broken over champagne and small talk. The lobby was a study in understated elegance, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of atmosphere that whispered expensive rather than shouting it. I spotted several familiar faces from previous company events, along with others I recognized from business magazines and society pages. "There's the registration table," Veronica said, guiding me toward a long table staffed by young women with tablets and practiced smiles. "Let's get you checked in." The woman at the table looked up expectantly as we approached. "Good evening, Ms. Harrington. And you must be Mr. Eldro. We have you both on the list." She handed me a name tag and a program, along with a small card indicating my table assignment. Table 12, according to the card. I glanced at the seating chart posted nearby and found my table near the back of the room, clearly not where Cleo had planned for me to sit. "Interesting," Veronica murmured, looking over my shoulder at the chart. "Table 12 is usually reserved for vendors and secondary guests. I wonder how that happened." "I have a feeling my wife was trying to be helpful," I said. We made our way into the main ballroom, A grand space with soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city lights. Round tables for 8 were scattered throughout the room, each one set with crisp white linens, gleaming silverware, and centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath. I scanned the room methodically, looking for Cleo and Anton. I found them near the front of the room, at a table that was clearly designated for VIPs, close to the stage where the evening's presentations would take place, surrounded by other tables full of people who mattered in Hartwell's business world. Cleo looked radiant in her new black dress, her hair swept up in an elegant style that showed off the diamond earrings I'd given her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She was laughing at something Anton was saying, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture that was just intimate enough to be noticed by anyone paying attention. Anton Beck looked exactly like what he was, old money wrapped in a custom suit, with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to worry about anything more serious than which yacht club to join. He was handsome in a conventional way, with perfectly styled hair and the kind of tan that suggested recent time in expensive places. They made a striking couple, I had to admit, the successful businesswoman and the well-connected financier, both young and attractive and clearly comfortable in this world of wealth and influence. Too bad their evening was about to get complicated. "Shall we mingle?" Veronica suggested. "I'd like to introduce you to a few people." We spent the next 30 minutes working the room, making small talk with investors and clients while I kept one eye on Cleo and Anton. They seemed to be having a wonderful time, completely absorbed in each other and apparently oblivious to my presence. That was about to change. At 7:30, the lights dimmed slightly, and a man in an expensive suit took the stage. I recognized him as David Hartwell, the company's founder and Veronica's business partner. "Good evening, everyone," he said into the microphone. "Welcome to Hartwell Cybersecurity's annual donor appreciation event. Before we begin tonight's program, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of you for your continued support of our mission." Polite applause rippled through the room. I noticed that Cleo and Anton had moved their chairs closer together, her hand now resting openly on his thigh under the table. "As many of you know," Hartwell continued, "this year has been one of tremendous growth for our company. We've expanded our client base, developed new security protocols, and strengthened our position as a leader in cybersecurity solutions." More applause. I checked my watch. 8 o'clock. Time to make my move. I excused myself from my table and made my way toward the registration area, where I'd noticed the event coordinator earlier. She was a young woman with a clipboard and the kind of harried expression that suggested she was responsible for making sure everything went perfectly. "Excuse me," I said, approaching her with my most charming smile. "I'm Pierce Eldro. I think there might be some confusion about the seating arrangements." She looked down at her clipboard, flipping through several pages. "Mr. Eldro, yes. You're at table 12. Is there a problem?" "Well, according to the vendor contract, I have authority to make adjustments to seating arrangements if there are compliance issues, and I'm afraid there's been a significant oversight." Her expression shifted from harried to concerned. "What kind of oversight?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot of the email chain I'd discovered the night before. "My wife, Cleo Eldro, has been corresponding with another guest about their seating arrangement. The problem is that she's listed herself as his guest rather than as my wife, which creates a conflict of interest given her position with the company." The coordinator studied the emails, her frown deepening. "I see the issue. What would you like me to do about it?" "I'd like to exercise my authority under Section 12 of the vendor agreement. I need to reassign several guests to different tables, and I'll need to make an announcement to clarify the situation." She looked uncertain. "I should probably check with Ms. Harrington about this." "Of course," I said. "She's right over there." Veronica appeared at my elbow as if summoned, wearing an expression of professional concern. "Is there a problem?" "Mr. Eldro has identified a compliance issue with the seating arrangements," the coordinator explained, showing Veronica the emails on my phone. Veronica studied them for a moment, then looked at me with something that might have been admiration. This is quite serious. Yes, I think Mr. Eldro should exercise his authority under the contract. We can't have conflicts of interest at an event like this. The coordinator nodded, looking relieved to have clear direction. What changes would you like to make? First, I'd like Mr. Beck moved from table 3 to table 12. That's the vendor table in the back. Second, I'd like my wife moved to table 10, where she can sit with other company employees. And third, I'd like to be moved to table 3, where I can properly represent our family's interests. And the announcement? I smiled. I'll handle that myself. It took about 10 minutes to implement the changes. Table assignments were updated, new place cards were printed, and discreet staff members began the process of relocating guests. I watched from across the room as a server approached Anton Beck and quietly informed him of his new seating assignment. The confusion on his face was priceless. He looked around the room, clearly trying to figure out what had happened, while Cleo stared at the server in obvious shock. They had a brief, intense conversation, with lots of gesturing and what appeared to be some heated words. Then Cleo spotted me. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and I saw the exact moment when she realized what was happening. Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, anger, and finally a kind of cold calculation that I'd never seen before. She stood up from her table and began making her way toward me, moving through the crowd with the kind of determined stride that suggested she was planning to have words. Anton followed close behind, his face flushed with what looked like embarrassment and anger. I waited for them near the registration table, standing next to Veronica and the event coordinator. When they reached me, Cleo's composure was hanging by a thread. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she said, her voice low but intense. "Attending my wife's company party," I replied calmly. "You remember, the one you said I couldn't come to because it would make your ex-boyfriend feel awkward." Anton stepped forward, puffing up his chest in what I assumed was meant to be an intimidating manner. "Look, buddy, I don't know what your problem is, but—" "My problem," I interrupted, "is that my wife told me to stay home so she could parade you around like a trophy. My problem is that she's been lying to me for months about your relationship, and my problem is that you both thought you could humiliate me publicly and I'd just take it quietly." Cleo's face had gone pale. "Pierce, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand that you've been planning this evening for weeks. I understand that you moved our calendar, rerouted invitations, and tried to erase me from your professional life so you could play house with Anton here." I pulled out my phone and showed them the same email screenshots I'd shown the coordinator. "I also understand that you forgot about the vendor contract that gives me authority over situations exactly like this one." Anton was staring at the phone screen, his face growing redder by the moment. "Those are private communications between my wife and her lover," I finished, "at a company event where she represents Hartwell Cybersecurity and I represent our family trust. That makes it a business matter, which means it's subject to the compliance clauses in our vendor agreement." Veronica stepped forward, her expression professionally neutral. "I'm afraid Mr. Eldro is correct about the contract terms. Given the circumstances, his actions are entirely within his authority." Cleo turned to her boss, desperation creeping into her voice. "Veronica, this is a misunderstanding. Pierce is being unreasonable." "Actually," Veronica said, "I think Pierce is being quite reasonable. He discovered that his wife was misrepresenting her relationship status at a company event, and he took appropriate steps to correct the situation. That's exactly what the compliance clauses are designed to address." The coordinator cleared her throat nervously. "Mr. Eldro, you mentioned wanting to make an announcement?" I nodded. "Yes, I think it's important that everyone understands what happened here tonight." Cleo grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my jacket. "Pierce, please, don't do this. We can work this out privately." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. You should have thought about that before you decided to work it out publicly with Anton. I gently removed her hand and walked toward the stage, where David Hartwell was wrapping up his remarks about the company's future plans. He saw me approaching and paused, looking questioningly at Veronica, who nodded from across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hartwell said into the microphone, "we have a brief announcement from Pierce Eldro, representing the Eldro Family Trust." The room fell quiet as I took the microphone. 200 faces turned toward me, including Cleo's, which was now white as the tablecloths. "Thank you," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. I wanted to take a moment to clarify a situation that developed this evening regarding seating arrangements and guest relationships. I could see Anton trying to make his way toward the exit, but the crowd was too thick for a quick escape. Earlier tonight, it came to my attention that there was some confusion about family relationships and professional boundaries. Specifically, my wife Cleo had arranged to attend this event as the guest of another man, rather than as my wife and a representative of Hartwell Cybersecurity. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was the kind of drama that would be talked about in Boston business circles for months. I want to assure everyone that this situation has been resolved through the appropriate contractual channels. The vendor agreement for this event includes specific provisions for addressing conflicts of interest, and those provisions have been implemented tonight. I paused, letting the implications sink in. I also want to thank Veronica Harrington and the staff at Hartwell for their professionalism in handling this matter. It's clear that this company maintains the highest standards of integrity, both in business and in personal conduct. More murmurs, and I could see people at various tables turning to look at Cleo, who was standing frozen near the registration area. "In closing," I said, "I want to wish everyone a wonderful evening. I hope you'll all remember this event as an example of how conflicts can be resolved through proper channels and appropriate action. Thank you." I handed the microphone back to Hartwell, who looked like he wasn't sure whether to be impressed or concerned. The room erupted in a buzz of conversation as I made my way back toward Veronica. Cleo intercepted me halfway across the room, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "You just destroyed my career," she said. "No," I replied. "You destroyed your career. I just made sure everyone knew about it." Anton appeared beside her, looking like he wanted to take a swing at me. "You're going to pay for this, you pathetic—" "Careful," I said, stepping closer to him. "We're in a room full of witnesses, and I'm the guy who teaches people how to defend themselves for a living. Are you really sure you want to finish that sentence?" He backed down, but the hatred in his eyes was unmistakable. "This isn't over." "You're right," I said. "It's not, because tomorrow morning I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly why. Your girlfriend here is going to be single again, which means you can have her. Congratulations." I turned to Veronica, who was watching the entire exchange with obvious fascination. "Thank you for the ride tonight. I think I'll catch a cab home." "Actually," she said, "why don't you stay for dinner? I think you've earned it." I looked back at Cleo, who was standing in the middle of the ballroom looking lost and humiliated, while Anton tried to comfort her and salvage what was left of his own dignity. "You know what?" I said. "I think I will." We made our way to table 3, the VIP table where Cleo had planned to sit with Anton. The other guests welcomed us warmly, apparently having enjoyed the evening's entertainment. As we sat down to dinner, I could see Cleo and Anton making their way toward the exit, their evening thoroughly ruined. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd told me not to come to the party because she didn't want Anton to feel awkward. Well, mission accomplished. I was pretty sure he was feeling more than awkward right about now. Poor guy. He should have stayed home. The morning after the party dawned gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes everything look like a crime scene. I was up early, partly from habit and partly because I hadn't slept much. The house felt different now, bigger somehow, like the walls had expanded to accommodate all the empty space between Cleo and me. She hadn't come home the night before. I'd expected that. but it still felt strange to wake up alone in a bed I'd shared with someone for 8 years. Her side was still made up, pillows arranged the way she liked them, as if she might walk through the door at any moment and pretend nothing had happened. I made coffee and checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Cleo, 12 text messages, and 3 voicemails. I deleted them all without reading or listening. Whatever she had to say, I wasn't ready to hear it yet. The gym opened at 6, and I was there by 5:30, going through my morning routine of checking equipment and reviewing the day's schedule. Physical work helped clear my head, and I had a lot of thinking to do about what came next. Jake showed up around 7, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd heard interesting news. "So," he said, handing me one of the cups. "How'd it go last night?" "Better than expected," I said. "Worse than Cleo hoped." He laughed. "I heard from 3 different people that you gave a speech that's going to be talked about for years. Something about vendor contracts and professional integrity. Word travels fast. In this town? Hell, I knew what happened before you got home last night. My cousin Diane was working the catering, and she said it was like watching a car accident in slow motion. Beautiful and terrible at the same time." I sipped my coffee and watched the early morning regulars filter in. Construction workers getting in a quick workout before their shifts, stay-at-home mothers taking advantage of the quiet hours before their kids woke up, retirees who treated the gym like their social club. "So what's the plan now?" Jake asked. "Divorce lawyer first," I said. "Then I figure out how to rebuild my life without her in it." "And revenge? You satisfied with what you accomplished last night, or is this just the opening act?" I considered the question. The public humiliation had felt good, better than I'd expected, actually. Seeing Cleo's face when she realized what was happening, watching Anton's confident smirk disappear when he understood that his evening wasn't going according to plan. But was it enough? "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "Ask me again in a week." My phone rang around 9 o'clock. The caller ID showed Veronica Harrington's name. "Pierce," she said when I answered. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all. What can I do for you?" "Actually, I was hoping we could meet for lunch. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you about last night." "Professional things or personal things?" She laughed. "Both, probably. Are you free around noon?" We agreed to meet at a restaurant downtown, the kind of place where business deals were made over expensive steaks and single malt whiskey. I spent the morning working with clients and trying not to think about what Veronica might want to discuss. The restaurant was exactly what I'd expected. Dark wood, leather banquettes, and the kind of atmosphere that suggested serious conversations. Veronica was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a view of the street. "You look better than I expected," she said as I sat down across from her. "What did you expect? A man who'd just blown up his marriage and humiliated his wife in front of 200 people? I thought you might be having some regrets." I signaled the waiter for a drink. "The only regret I have is that it took me so long to figure out what was really going on." She nodded approvingly. "That's what I was hoping you'd say, because I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." The waiter brought my whiskey, and Veronica waited until he was gone before continuing. "Cleo submitted her resignation this morning, effective immediately. She cited personal circumstances and irreconcilable differences with management. And I'm not accepting it. Instead, I'm placing her on administrative leave pending an investigation into her conduct at last night's event. Specifically, her misrepresentation of her relationship status and her attempts to manipulate seating arrangements for personal gain." I took a sip of whiskey, feeling the burn all the way down. What does that have to do with me? I need someone to take over her responsibilities while the investigation is ongoing. Someone who understands the business, has experience with client relations, and won't be swayed by office politics or personal relationships. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you Cleo's job, head of client services, Six-figure salary, full benefits, and the satisfaction of knowing that you're better at it than she ever was. I stared at her across the table, trying to process what she was saying. Why? Because last night, you demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking and calm under pressure that I need in my senior staff. You identified a problem, developed a solution, and implemented it flawlessly. You turned what could have been a disaster for the company into a demonstration of our commitment to integrity and professional standards. And because you want to stick it to Cleo. She smiled. That's just a bonus. The main reason is that I think you'd be good at the job. Better than good, actually. You understand people, you're not afraid of confrontation, and you have the kind of practical intelligence that can't be taught in business school. What about my gym? Keep it. Run it in the evenings and weekends or hire a manager. The client services position is flexible enough to accommodate other commitments. I finished my whiskey and signaled for another. What happens to Cleo? That depends on what the investigation finds. But between you and me, her career in cybersecurity is probably over. Word is already spreading about what happened last night, and this is a small industry. She'll be lucky to find work managing a computer repair shop. And Anton? Anton Beck is about to discover that his cryptocurrency investments weren't as secure as he thought. Funny how these things work out. I looked at her across the table, this sharp, successful woman who was offering me a chance to completely reinvent my life. You planned this, didn't you? The whole thing. I suspected Cleo was up to something, she admitted. She'd been acting strangely for weeks, making requests that didn't make sense, asking about policies that had nothing to do with her job. When you called yesterday morning, I put the pieces together. So you used me to get rid of her. I gave you the opportunity to get rid of her. There's a difference. She was right, and we both knew it. Cleo had made her choices, and I'd made mine. The fact that those choices aligned with Veronica's business interests was just convenient for everyone involved. When would you need an answer? Take the weekend to think about it. But Pierce, don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the gym, working with clients and trying to imagine what my life would look like if I accepted Veronica's offer. More money, certainly, more prestige, a chance to prove that I was more than just the guy who owned a gym, more than just Cleo's husband who didn't quite fit into her professional world. Around 5 o'clock, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Eldro, this is Margaret Chen from Peterson, Walsh & Associates. I'm an attorney, and I've been retained to represent your wife in connection with your divorce proceedings. I haven't filed for divorce yet, I said. Mrs. Eldro would like to discuss the possibility of reconciliation before any formal proceedings begin. Would you be willing to meet with us? When and where? Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, at our offices downtown. Mrs. Eldro will be there, along with myself and my partner. Will Anton Beck be there too? There was a pause. I'm not sure I understand the relevance of that question. Just wondering if this is a reconciliation meeting or a strategy session. I'll see you tomorrow at 10. I hung up and immediately called my own lawyer, a guy named Tom Bradley, who'd handled the legal work when I'd bought the gym. He was a former prosecutor who'd gone into private practice, the kind of lawyer who understood that sometimes the best defense was a good offense. Pierce, he said, when I explained the situation. Are you sure you want to do this? Divorce can get ugly fast, especially when there's infidelity involved. I'm sure, I said. And Tom? I want to make sure she doesn't get the gym. That shouldn't be a problem. The gym was yours before the marriage, and you've kept it separate from your joint assets. But Pierce, if you're serious about this, you need to be prepared for her to fight dirty. Let her fight, I said. I'm not the same guy who let her walk all over me for the last 8 years. That evening, I sat in my empty house and thought about the choices that had led me to this moment. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of trying to be the supportive husband while Cleo built her career and gradually pushed me to the margins of her life. 8 years of telling myself that love meant compromise, that marriage meant putting someone else's dreams ahead of your own. Well, I was done compromising. My phone buzzed with another text from Cleo. "Please call me. We need to talk." I deleted it and poured myself another whiskey. Tomorrow I'd sit across from her in a lawyer's office and listen to her try to salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But tonight, I was going to enjoy the silence of a house where I didn't have to pretend everything was fine. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and negotiations and the messy business of untangling 8 years of shared life. But tonight was mine. For the first time in months, that felt like enough. The law offices of Peterson, Walsh and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Boston, the kind of building where serious people made serious money solving serious problems. I arrived 10 minutes early and spent the time in the lobby watching lawyers and clients move through the marble-floored space with the focused intensity of sharks in expensive suits. Tom Bradley met me at the elevator, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's cars. He was a compact man in his 50s, with gray hair and the kind of steady presence that came from years of courtroom battles. "Ready for this?" he asked as we rode up to the 20th floor. "More than ready," I said. The conference room was all glass and chrome, with a view of Boston Harbor that probably added $50 to every billable hour. Cleo was already there, sitting beside a woman in her 40s who radiated the kind of professional competence that made other lawyers nervous. Across from them sat a younger man who was presumably the associate assigned to take notes and look intimidating. Cleo looked terrible. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was wearing a conservative blue suit that made her look like she was attending a funeral, which, in a way, she was. "Pierce," she said, as I took my seat across from her. "Thank you for coming." I nodded but didn't respond. Tom had coached me on this. Let them talk first. Let them show their cards before revealing anything about our strategy. Margaret Chen, the lead attorney, opened a folder and pulled out several documents. "Mr. Eldro, my client would like to propose a settlement that would allow both of you to move forward with minimal disruption to your lives." "I'm listening," I said. "Mrs. Eldro is prepared to waive any claim to your business assets, including the gym and associated equipment. In exchange, she would retain the house and her retirement accounts, and you would agree to a modest spousal support arrangement for a period of 2 years. Tom leaned forward slightly. "Define modest." $3,000 per month, Chen said, "which we believe is reasonable given Mrs. Eldro's current employment situation." I almost laughed. Her current employment situation is that she's unemployed because she got caught cheating at a company event. Why exactly would I pay spousal support to someone who destroyed her own career? Cleo spoke for the first time. "Pierce, please. I know you're angry, but we can work this out. What happened with Anton was a mistake. I never meant for things to go as far as they did." "How far did they go?" I asked. She glanced at her lawyer, who nodded slightly. "We were having an affair. It started about 3 months ago. But it's over now. Anton and we ended things after what happened at the party." "Convenient timing," I said. "It's the truth," she insisted. "I realized that I'd made a terrible mistake. I want to save our marriage, Pierce. I want us to try counseling, to work through this together." I studied her face, looking for any sign of the woman I'd married 8 years ago. She was still beautiful, still intelligent, still capable of making people believe whatever she wanted them to believe. But something fundamental had changed. The trust was gone, and without that, everything else was just performance. "No," I said. "No to counseling, or no to reconciliation?" Chen asked. "No to all of it. No to counseling, no to reconciliation, no to spousal support, and definitely no to letting her keep the house." Cleo's composure finally cracked. "The house is in both our names. You can't just take it away from me. Watch me, I said. Tom? Tom opened his own briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. We've done some research into the timeline of Mrs. Eldrow's affair. Based on credit card records, phone logs, and social media activity, it appears that the relationship with Mr. Beck began approximately 6 months ago, not 3 months, as she just claimed. He slid several documents across the table. These are hotel receipts, restaurant charges, and travel expenses that Mrs. Eldrow paid for using joint credit cards. She was essentially using marital assets to fund her extramarital relationship. Chen studied the documents, her expression growing more serious. This is concerning, but it doesn't necessarily change the basic division of assets. Actually, it does, Tom continued, because Massachusetts law allows for an unequal division of marital assets when one spouse has engaged in misconduct that affects the economic circumstances of the marriage. Mrs. Eldrow's affair directly led to her loss of employment, which affects her ability to contribute to the household income. Furthermore, I added, I've been offered a position with Hartwell Cybersecurity, Cleo's former position, actually. So not only did her misconduct cost her a job, it created an opportunity for me. The color drained from Cleo's face. Veronica offered you my job? She offered me a job. Whether it was yours depends on whether you still work there. Margaret Chen looked like she was rapidly recalculating her strategy. Mr. Eldrow, what exactly are you proposing? Simple, I said. Cleo gets her personal belongings and her car. I keep everything else. The house, the gym, the investment accounts, the retirement funds, no spousal support, no ongoing obligations, clean break. That's completely unreasonable, Chen protested. Mrs. Eldrow contributed to the household income throughout the marriage. She has a right to a fair share of the marital assets. She had a right to a fair share, I corrected. She gave up that right when she decided to use our joint accounts to fund her affair and then tried to publicly humiliate me at her company party. Cleo was crying now, tears streaming down her face as the reality of her situation sank in. Pierce, please. I know I made mistakes, but this is my life we're talking about. Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to survive? You should have thought about that before you started planning to replace me with Anton, I said. Speaking of which, how's that working out for you? Is he stepping up to provide the financial support you're looking for? Her silence was answer enough. Tom leaned back in his chair. Miss Chen, I think we should be clear about something. This isn't really a negotiation. Mrs. Eldrow is in no position to make demands. She's unemployed, unemployable in her chosen field, and facing potential legal action from her former employer for breach of contract and misrepresentation. Legal action? Cleo looked panicked. Hartwell is conducting an investigation into your conduct, I explained. Veronica mentioned something about misuse of company resources and violation of professional ethics standards. Apparently, using company time and equipment to coordinate personal relationships is frowned upon. Chen was frantically taking notes. Mr. Eldrow, surely we can reach some kind of compromise, perhaps a smaller spousal support payment or a longer timeline for Mrs. Eldrow to secure new employment. No, I said, standing up. Tom, I think we're done here. Wait, Cleo said, grabbing my arm as I moved toward the door. Pierce, please, I'm begging you, don't do this to me. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. You did this to yourself, Cleo. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I gently removed her hand and walked toward the door. Tom followed, gathering his documents as he stood. Ms. Chen, he said, we'll file the divorce papers tomorrow morning. If Mrs. Eldrow wants to contest any of the terms, she's welcome to try. But I should warn you that we have additional evidence we haven't shared yet. Evidence that would make this situation even more embarrassing for your client. What evidence? Chen asked. Tom smiled. Let's just say that Mr. Beck wasn't as discreet about his relationship with Mrs. Eldrow as he thought he was. There are photos, text messages, and at least one video that would make interesting exhibits in a contested divorce proceeding. Cleo made a sound like a wounded animal. You recorded us? I didn't have to, I said. Anton did it himself. Apparently, he likes to document his conquests. Unfortunately for both of you, he wasn't very careful about where he stored the files. The truth was, I was bluffing. I had no idea whether such evidence existed, but the look on Cleo's face suggested that it might, and that was enough to make the point. "We'll be in touch," Tom said, and we walked out of the conference room, leaving Cleo and her lawyers to contemplate their rapidly shrinking options. In the elevator, Tom looked at me with something like admiration. "That was cold, Pierce. Effective, but cold." "She wanted to play games," I said. "I just made sure I understood the rules better than she did." "What's your next move?" "Accept Veronica's job offer, sell the house, start over somewhere that doesn't have memories on every corner." "And the gym?" I thought about that for a moment. The gym was where I'd built my life after the military, where I'd found purpose and community and the satisfaction of helping people become stronger versions of themselves. It was real in a way that nothing else in my life had been. "Keep the gym," I said. "Some things are worth holding on to." We walked out of the building into the gray October afternoon. Boston stretched out around us, full of possibilities and new beginnings. Somewhere in the city, Cleo was probably sitting in that conference room, trying to figure out how her carefully planned life had fallen apart so completely. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity for her, but only a moment. She'd made her choices, and now she'd have to live with the consequences. As for me, I had a new job to start, a business to run, and a life to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be honest. And after 8 years of pretending everything was fine, honest felt like a luxury I could finally afford. The rain had started again, turning the city streets into mirrors that reflected the lights of passing cars. I pulled out my phone and called Veronica. "I'll take the job," I said